Robin Rihanna Fenty tings, Chris Brown tings, viral cartoon boot tings. The tea may be cold, but I'm coming in hot today, fam. Your girl legit just got off a plane this morning, but I'm back. I got my eye weave on, so buckle up, buckaroos. What's the crack, baby? It's your girl T, aka nappy-headed jojoba. Not nappy, not jojoba. Nappy-headed jojoba. You have to say the whole thing. It's like Dino Vengers featuring Street Sharks. If you even know what that is, hey, bestie. Indulge me in a bit of self-promote before we get started today. I have had my Patreon going for a few years now. Here's a couple of videos that I put up in this month for my Ride or Dies tier, so y'all can have an idea of the type of content that I do over there. Shout out to all of my patrons who have been riding with me for 1 month or 1 year or for this entire time. Love y'all down because you're the only reason I haven't quit making content entirely. Patrons always get my videos early before the YouTube masses since day one, but I'm taking a page from Wu-Tang Financial and I'm trying to diversify my bonds. So I'm also building up new nappy-headed jojoba pages on both Rumble and Locals. As we have discussed here many times, YouTube is unreliable and actively suppressing my content, so that's why I ain't on here like I was a few years back. I legit just created my Rumble and Locals pages. Rumble owns Locals, by the way. If Rumble is YouTube without the shadow bans and content suppression, Locals is like the YouTube channel member section of Locals. Does that make sense? My plan for the time being, just while I'm starting up these pages and trying to build, is to post my YouTube videos to patrons early as always, and then to Rumble in a second early access window, slightly less early than that of the patrons, but still before you'll see them here on YouTube. Not sure how long I'm gonna do this, but yeah, I'm trying to build. There's a link in the D-Box to my Patreon as always, as well as to the new Rumble channel, where you could have seen this video early and uncensored before you're seeing it now on YouTube. So if you're keen to see my next drop early, give your girl a follow on Rumble, again, which is free. On to the tea. In the name of SEO, I'm gonna start off with Robin Fenty. She is on the way to having some stair-step babies, because as we have all heard by now, whether we care or not, she's already got a second bun in the oven. Y'all really ain't never getting another album. Condolences to the Coast Guard.
It's Navy.
I mean Navy. The pregnancy announcement was more or less made when the fetus made a guest appearance on stage with her at her Super Bowl performance earlier this month, and her reps confirmed she was in a family type of way the same day, if I'm not mistaken. Then last week, they dropped the images from her in Vogue. Well, British Vogue.
Uh-oh, here come the dislikes.
All of that was uncalled for. Why am I like this? First off, on some podcasts, that proves yet again that we need to abolish podcasts. Some male or another complained that A$AP Rocky should have been in the front, leading her on the cover, even though it's not his Vogue cover, and even though she's logarithmically more famous. TT, roll the clip.
You didn't like it, right? I would have been in the front. I don't mind holding a baby, but I feel like the man should always be in the front leading. You know, it's like when you see commercials and you're like, damn, that's the agenda now. You could just tell, right? You see a commercial and you see the kind of couples they pushing in front of us. It's like, okay, that's the agenda. I can acknowledge the agenda.
Here are a couple of comments under that clip which cleared that male spouting the nonsense. Love to see it. One of the rare instances where a comment section made me feel slightly less doomed. Anyway, obviously Robin also shared the photos from this British Vogue cover feature on her social media accounts, but then also too as well called her infant son fine in the caption of one of her posts, which, child, I guess. Now look, fine is used a lot of different ways. Like one might say, that's a mighty fine credenza, or sure is a fine day for a brisk constitutional. You know, stuff like that that normal people say all the time in 2023 AD. But in my experience, when it's black people talking about another person, fine connotes attraction. It connotes a sentiment that is definitely peculiar of a parent to express about their child. Or any child, really. Comment sections, as is always the case on the internet, were either one, aghast and outraged at Riri for saying her own son is fine, because after all, if a man said the same thing about his daughter, you'd only be a creep if you didn't think it was creepy. On the other end of the binary thought hellscape that is internet discourse were the
No, y'all weird for even taking it there
folks. I tend to fall into the former group rather than the latter, mainly because she added, I don't care, I don't care, I don't care to the end of the caption. To me, that's a tell. She's telling us that she means it the weird way, and she knows it's weird, and she don't care. I hate to even speak Amy Schumer's name, especially since she probably stole this joke from a less famous comic, but she had one joke in one of her specials 100 years ago where she was talking about meeting her boyfriend's mother and how there was always a weird vibe from the mother to her, the girlfriend, of
I wanted to my son.
And I remember I felt like I knew exactly what vibe she was getting at with that joke, and I'm sure a lot of y'all do too. Jumping back to the but if it were reversed argument, where people will flip genders or races in a certain situation to prove a point, a tactic that I usually find tedious, repetitive, and obvious. We have an actual case in point that coincided with this Robin Fenty story, albeit admittedly far, far, far more, and I mean exponentially more disturbing. Here comes the wrongness courtesy of Lil Duval, because woo chile, when I first read these headlines about Lil Duval, I said, who? But I continued reading, and turns out this male quote some truly horrific tweets back in 2012. It's always 2012, and here they go. You can read them for yourself. I would say this is indeed the inverse of how many folks interpreted at Bad Gal Riri's comments about her own son, taken to their logical conclusion. It's a big yikes. And since we all know how much people like to cite youth and ignorance when they get exposed for being disgusting, this person did the world a solid by shutting that down immediately. Indefensible, yet there are, no doubt, skeezers and weirdos defending him in them comment section screeds. Jumping back to Rihanna right quick, the Lil Duval mess folded into that first Riri ting, but there's actually another Riri story I want to touch, and that's about how a decent number of folks were reminding her stans of how back in 2018, Miss Fenty turned down the NFL's first ask to do the halftime show. At the time, she claimed she was doing so in solidarity with Colin Kaepernick. She said at the time, and this is a direct quotation, "I just couldn't be a sellout." And since she made that declaration, we've seen nothing but continued evidence of racism with no substantive changes within the NFL in the 5-year interim, unless you want to count empty gestures like partnering with the likes of Sean Carter. After all, no one can deny that he is a real tycoon. A real tycoon. What did I say? Anyway, the Jay-Z stunt was obvious pandering, and anyone who's for real been done with the NFL and ain't changed course. So the fact that Miss Fenty was okay with doing the show 5 years later struck some as a bit weird, inconsistent, even hypocritical. Now, if you ask me, what she should have did was blame it on Roc Nation, just like Travel Size's daddy. Or she could have simply admitted that she's in it for the money and the money was too good. Woke wash it with some buzzwords, talking about how she's creating generational wealth, and maybe say something about your ancestors' wildest dreams and leave it at that. But of course, that is not what she said to address these critiques. Instead, she said, this? What is the urban community? And what is the message being sent exactly? Anyway, she's a billionairess. Clearly she's focused on getting the most profit for the least work. Like any capitalist who's actually good at it, no one has ever, and I mean ever, done $1 billion worth of work, and that includes Robin Fenty. Agreeing to do this performance was, in a certain sense, inevitable. This is what's on brand, not that garbage about not selling out back in 18. All that was a combination of pandering and leveraging for future negotiations. I'm not kidding when I say that I wish these celebrities would just keep it a buck and stop playing in our faces. Just say you was in your bag. The end. Even if we don't agree with it, I think we'd at least appreciate the honesty, and many of us would still understand. I'd certainly understand that far better than whatever that horse was about the urban community. As if all of this wasn't already enough of a child, I guess, type of situation. Evidently, some sort of Fenty Beauty merch makeup came out to coincide with and celebrate the Sellout Bowl performance. I saw someone talking about this somewhere in the YouTube beauty community streets where deadass Fenty appears to be selling y'all product samples. I realize it's a set, but still, within that set, they are now selling people product samples. If that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about this entire "but you said in 2018" situation, nothing will. Moving on, the Jenner child now seems to be trying her hand at baiting for attention, since I guess digging through King Jeffrey Joffer's dirty laundry didn't hit the way she thought it would, but nobody cares about this stunt either, so we gon' move on for moving on swiftly. Especially since Rihanna segues more logically, albeit extremely messily, to Christopher Brown. Light Ike, as Kid Fury used to call him. Chloe Bailey has a new song with Christopher Brown, and obviously the backlash to this announcement was immediate. In the years since he whooped Rihanna's ass, he's collaborated with dozens of artists, including Rihanna. So this lather, rinse, repeat of people being upset that so-and-so decided to work with or support Chris Brown, since that infamous night in Larchmont is to be expected. Kelly Rowland and Ciara both just got out of the hot seat for being Team Breezy like a month ago. In response to this week's backlash, Christopher has been voicing his displeasure with the folks who continue to hold his feet to the fire over his abusive history. In voicing this displeasure, he has made reference to several other white celebrities who also have histories of abuse, but who don't get any of the smoke that he has received pretty steadily for nearly 2 decades now. He is not wrong about this. He's not. However, that also doesn't excuse his behavior, let alone theirs. He's essentially asking, why is it okay when they do it? It is not okay? It's not that if folks let it slide with that UFC guy, Dana whatever, or Sean Penn, or whoever else, then they should also let it slide with him. Those males should get the same smoke that he does as far as I'm concerned. I'd also say that he has continued to have quite a career in spite of everything. Granted, there have been instances of him being removed from shows or events or losing features because of a public outcry, but it seems to me that he stays touring, stays platformed and accessible on all of the music streaming services, stays hosting them club parties or whatever, and as we covered, stays collaborating with lots of artists. He is booked and busy. He just doesn't want the backlash for being booked and busy. He's also high-key giving revisionist history because he's seemingly only referring to assaulting Rihanna as if that's the only incident. And you wasn't 17 when that happened. You was pushing 20. I'm an 80s baby too, so I remember that moment vividly. And he wasn't no damn minor. Are we all meant to pretend that his scary, volatile, often misogynistic behavior has not continued fairly linearly? This Twitter person summed up my feelings pretty well, so shout out to them. Pause to read if these are going by too fast, but the too long I did not read that is, if you feel guilty for liking him as a performer in spite of his obvious problems, that's valid. He is talented. But there's no need to lie about his behavior because a nigga can do the moonwalk. And I don't just mean lying by omission. I'm also talking about excusing things he's done on some, well, Rihanna forgave him. First of all, it is not uncommon for victims of abuse to forgive, protect, and even go back to their abusers. Second of all, rewind this video about 30 seconds and seriously read them tweets. Rihanna isn't the only one who's been on the receiving end of his rage. I think it's just that we tend to feel guilty when we admire someone for one thing they do and do really well, but then there's this other thing they do that is so fucking terrible we can't reconcile the emotion of liking that first thing about them. From Woody Allen to Dr. Dre, people will dig their heels into delusion before they'll be honest about their need to separate the art that they like from an artist who they know damn well they shouldn't like. Quiet as it's kept, a lot of Team Breezy are women who omit the facts of Brown's behavior because they're attracted to him. They operate the way that they do because they haven't yet been direct victims of his anger, misogyny, and colorism and misogynoir. You know, the birds who are fine with something f***ed up until it happens to them. Oh, but then they finally see the problem, don't they? It's like the Tinder swindler's girlfriend who deadass watched the documentary about his scamming ass sitting next to him and then defended him publicly. She's coming out now talking about how he conned her out of like 150 bands. Oh, so it was okay and he was a good guy back when you thought you were the exception. Like I said, it is valid to think that the defendant is a great performer. Go ahead, I get it. What's not valid is lying about his history to avoid confronting that guilt creeping up on you, but still liking him as a performer. Or liking him as someone whomst you are delusional enough to think you might get to f*** one day. This is the same type of lying and cognitive dissonance that gets critical race theory banned, y'all. The inability to reconcile one's conscience with reality. I do believe in giving people chances to make amends and to do better and to be better. Yes, even Chris Brown. If hurt people was a person, that person is Chris Brown, you feel me? Problem here is when it comes to not repeatedly paying forward your trauma and instead actually doing the hard thing to become better over time, that just never seems to have happened. I ain't really followed his career since he was dancing for Doublemint, but it seems like every time I do hear about him, to this day, it's usually behind some mess. I have compassion because clearly the guy ain't well and I don't see him getting better. Less yayo, more therapy. and showers. Oh, and even the Blueface was getting into it after Chris Brown was saying something about how when it comes to the fisticuffs, somehow it's just entertainment when it's Blueface and Chris Sean or whatever. Sidebar, I'm still trying to understand why these two people are in my feed every damn day, because what the f is a Blueface? Where did these people come from? Anyway, when Crack Brown tried to say there was a double standard with the treatment he receives and how people respond to the blatantly abusive and violent relationship between Mr. Face and Ms. Sean. The point here is the two of them have more or less monetized domestic violence, and Breezy was all, but now when I do it, it's a problem. And Blueface responded in truly appalling fashion because of duh.
You got a bad judge, like, you feel me? We didn't all get the same judge, Kim. God, I got a, you feel me? She gonna fight back, so I'm gonna get less time, you hear me? You beat up yeah, you beat up the wrong bitch. You beat up the bitch that just performed at the Super Bowl. Like, yeah, like, I'm sorry, fool. Like, you should have got you a little ghetto bitch or something that you could fight with. That's what I did. I could have had plenty of famous bitches. I decided to go to, feel me, my natural element, underground, you feel me?
You annoying, man.
Bitiyaki. Moral of the story, watch it. You can't be watching a bitch you beat up.
The Blueface also looks like he may have not one but two black eyes not so well hidden behind them shades, which is particularly on brand for the topic of them videos. Legit, everything is wrong with what he said in response, let alone the fact that that's, I'm assuming, Chris Sean, whatever, agreeing in the background. Listen, I say a lot that we are not responsible for our trauma, but we are responsible for our healing. Across the board here, with Christopher Brown and the other two, I can't waste my energy wanting better for people than they want for themselves. On a somewhat lighter note, can we talk about them boots real quick? Because unpopular opinion, I love them. I want them, give them to me. Y'all may as well know my fashion sense has always incorporated camp to one degree or another, so these silly boots are right up my street. I wear what can best be described as clown pants on a regular basis, so a goofy sleigh featuring these boots would just be me finally realizing my final form. Relax, I am not tempted to actually buy them because A of all, I am not committed enough to the bit to pay what they cost, and I'm sure they'd be harder to get than Renaissance tour tickets anyway. And two, there is no way I'd be able to get those off my legs after putting them on. No shot. But I've seen a lot of people shitting on these boots, and I get that. This moment in fashion and culture does in many ways represent the absolute worst of both capitalism and of celebrity, both of which I want abolished right along with podcasts. Still, regarding them boots, if we're talking about just the look, the vision, the fits I would put together. In an alternate reality, Bizarro TT, you know, the one who thinks billionaires get a bad rap, she'd probably cop these at an idiotic markup on one of them reseller sites and be completely at peace with it. Don't at me, I don't care. Ending it here, fam. I just got home with a fresh passport stamp and I ain't even adjusted back to this time zone yet, but I was screenshotting things like crazy the whole time I was away just because there was too much stuff I wanted to talk about. So thank you for kicking it with me all the way to this, the goodbye. I don't think I've ever filmed legit the same day I'm getting back from international travel, but I had something to say today. I even successfully smuggled some Shadow Beanie through customs, which I'm hoping and praying I'll be able to propagate, so I'm gonna need all my Trinis out there to give me tips on perfecting my pepper sauce and green seasoning in 23. Don't forget to check me out on Rumble and Locals for early access on whatever content I'm eventually putting here on YouTube, at least for the time being while I'm seeing how all of this goes. And last but most certainly not least, make sure y'all stay safe, stay dangerous, and never trust me if I end up popping up here one day wearing them Toontown built-ass boots talking about, you know guys, these are actually a really good value because if you break down the cost per wear, because that is definitely not me. That is Bizarro TT from the other realm. Bye.
That's some nappy-headed hose there, I'm gonna tell you that now.